Part 1. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council hung in silence, a silence so thick it pressed against the ears like deep space itself. High above the polished obsidian floor, holographic banners of dozens of species shimmered in soft blues and golds, their symbols ancient and unreadable to most humans. At the center of it all stood Daniel Cruz, his uniform crisp but his eyes tired. He had spent the last 3 weeks arguing, negotiating, and pleading. None of it had worked. Around him, alien delegates shifted in their seats. The Vathari, tall and pale with eyes like polished onyx, sat motionless, their long fingers steepled in front of them. They had pushed the final resolution through with cold precision. Humanity's neural augmentation programs, developed to heal brain injuries, enhance memory, and even restore lost senses, were now declared a threat to galactic stability. The Council demanded immediate shutdown, full data surrender, and permanent oversight of all human scientific research. Daniel knew what that meant. It wasn't just about technology. It was about control. For over 50 years, humanity had been the youngest member of the Council, eager to prove itself, to belong. But belonging came at a price. Endless rules, trade restrictions, and constant surveillance. At first, it felt like protection. Now it felt like a cage. Back on Earth, the debate raged. Senator Lisa Morgan, representing the lunar colonies, warned that cutting ties would collapse the fragile economy. "We rely on Vathari energy grids and Xanthari medtech," she had said during the emergency session. "Walk away and millions suffer." Others, especially from Mars and the asteroid belt, argued the opposite. "They treat us like children," said a young delegate from Ceres. "We built our own ships, our own stations. Why do we need permission to think?" The vote was scheduled for 0900 Galactic Standard Time. Daniel had returned to Earth just hours before, his shuttle landing in the rain-slicked capital of New Geneva. He didn't go home. He went straight to the assembly hall, where representatives from every human world waited. Some wore formal suits, others flight jackets or simple tunics. What united them was exhaustion and fear. President Carl Dixon stood at the podium, his voice low but steady. "This isn't just policy," he said. "This is identity. If we give up the right to shape our own minds, what's left of us?" He didn't say the word freedom, but everyone heard it. The voting began. Each delegate pressed a small button on their console. Red for stay, blue for leave. The results scrolled across the central screen, line by line. Earth blue, Mars blue, Ceres blue, Titan colony red. Europa station red. The numbers crept closer, then stalled. It came down to the lunar delegation. Lisa Morgan hesitated, her finger hovering. Then she pressed blue. The room exhaled as one. The final tally, 52% in favor of secession. Humanity would leave the Galactic Council. Daniel didn't cheer. He felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Outside, the sky was gray, clouds rolling in from the Alps. He walked alone through the garden behind the assembly, past statues of explorers and poets. His comm unit buzzed. It was Admiral Nina Rodriguez, head of the Outer Rim Fleet. "It's done, isn't it?" she said. Not a question. "Yes," Daniel replied. "Then we have 6 hours," she said. "Council protocol demands all human vessels withdraw from Council space within 1 cycle. After that, we're trespassers." "I know," he said. He looked up. In the distance, a transport ship lifted off, its engines glowing faint orange against the clouds. It was the first of many. Over the next few days, the exodus began. Every human ship, freighters, research vessels, military cruisers, pulled out of ports on Kalis Prime, Vathar, and the neutral hubs near the Orion Veil. Families packed what they could. Scientists erased data they couldn't take. Diplomats handed over their credentials and walked away without looking back. On the Council's Grand Concourse, the human delegation section, once bright with Earth's blue and white banner, was stripped bare. A Vathari custodian rolled up the fabric without a word. No one spoke of betrayal. No one shouted. The silence was worse. Back on Mars, engineer Jake Ellis watched the news feeds with growing unease. He worked in a quiet lab beneath the Tharsis bulge, designing deep space sensors. For months, he'd noticed odd energy spikes from the outer rim, flickers that didn't match any known drive signature. He reported it, but the Council's science division dismissed it as solar interference. Now, with humans gone, who would listen? On Titan, a young medic named Ryan Cole packed his gear. He had spent 2 years treating refugees from border conflicts, using human-developed neural patches to heal trauma the Xanthari said was incurable. Now, Those same refugees would be cut off from his help. He wondered if they'd blame humanity for leaving, or thank them for trying. Meanwhile, in the heart of Vathari space, something stirred, deep in a sealed archive beneath the Capitol spire. A machine older than any living species hummed to life. It had been dormant for millennia, waiting for a specific signal, a pattern of thought, a certain kind of curiosity. The Council's final probe into forbidden space had triggered it, and now it began to wake. But no one knew that yet. On Earth, Daniel stood on a hill outside New Geneva, watching the last shuttle depart for the outer colonies. The sky was clear now, stars sharp and cold. He thought of his daughter, who had left for Mars 2 years ago chasing a dream of terraforming. He hoped she was safe. He hoped they all were. The Galactic Council broadcast a formal statement that evening. Humanity has chosen isolation, it read. Let the consequences be theirs alone. But consequences, as Daniel would soon learn, never stayed in one place. They spread, like fire, like silence. And in the dark between stars, the first council outpost went quiet. No distress call. No explosion. Just static. Then nothing. Humanity had walked away thinking they were protecting themselves. They didn't realize they had just stepped out of the storm and left everyone else inside it. Part 2. 2 years passed. Earth's skies grew quieter. The great orbital docks, once buzzing with alien freighters and council patrol ships, now echoed with emptiness. Trade routes that had carried food, medicine, and data across light years dried up like old riverbeds. Shelves in cities ran low on off-world alloys and biogels. Rationing began on the outer colonies. People grumbled, but no one asked to go back. Instead, something unexpected happened. Without the Council's rules, human scientists worked faster, freer. In hidden labs beneath the lunar surface and inside hollowed asteroids, they pushed boundaries once deemed too dangerous. Neural augmentation, banned by the Council, became a tool for healing and connection. Engineers built ships with quantum shielding that bent light around them like ghosts. Energy grids powered by zero-point fluctuations lit entire domes on Mars with no fuel at all. Jake Ellis, still working in his lab under the red dust of Tharsis, watched his deep-range beacon blink with strange signals. At first he thought it was interference, but the patterns repeated. Sharp bursts from the Vathari border, then silence. Then another burst farther out. He sent reports to Earth Command, but received only automated replies. Monitor and log, they said. Do not engage. He didn't know it, but across the galaxy the Council was unraveling. Without humanity's moderating voice, the Vathari tightened their grip. Species that once had voting rights were reduced to observers. Trade tariffs doubled. Dissent was labeled instability. Minor worlds, small green-skinned Kavani, insectoid Thrax, ocean-dwelling Mire, began to resist. Some cut ties quietly. Others fought back. A skirmish near the Helios rim turned into a full blockade. Supply ships vanished. Food rotted in orbit while children starved below. The Vathari blamed humanity. They left and chaos followed, declared High Overseer Kalen in a public address. Their absence created a vacuum. Now disorder spreads like a virus. Propaganda streams showed old footage of human ships leaving Council space, overlaid with images of burning cities on rebel worlds. The message was clear. Humanity had broken the peace. But the truth was darker. In the dead zones between star systems, whole fleets disappeared. A Vathari patrol of 12 ships entered the Oryx Nebula and never came out. Their last transmission was a single word repeated in a dozen languages. Gone. Then static. Refugee ships began appearing on the edges of human space. Battered, low on power. Crew half dead from radiation or fear. Some carried no weapons. Others fired on sight, thinking humans had set a trap. Admiral Nina Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Ars, her flagship, watching sensor readouts flicker with unknown contacts. She had spent the last 6 months tracking these ghost ships. They're not attacking us, she told her first officer. They're running. Still, Earth Command ordered caution. No contact, President Dixon insisted. We left for a reason. We don't get pulled back in. But Nina wasn't so sure. One night, a small vessel, barely larger than a shuttle, drifted into the Mars defense perimeter. Its hull was scorched, its engines dead. Inside, they found 3 survivors. 2 Kavani adults and a child, curled together in a cryopod. The adults were gone, frozen in death. The child lived. Nina broke protocol. She brought the child aboard. Medical scans showed severe neural trauma, But when Ryan Cole, the medic from Titan now stationed on Phobos, used a human neural patch to stabilize the child's brain, something remarkable happened. The child woke not speaking, but projecting images directly into Ryan's mind. Stars collapsing, ships turning on each other, a black shape moving through space like a shadow with teeth. Ryan reported it immediately. "It's not war," he said. "It's something hunting them." Meanwhile, on Earth, Daniel Cruz lived quietly in a coastal town, teaching history at a small university. He tried to forget the council, the vote, the weight of being the last human to speak in that grand chamber. But news of the refugees reached even his quiet corner. He watched feeds of broken ships being towed into lunar yards. He saw the fear in alien eyes. One evening, a message arrived on a secure channel. It was from Nina. "We need you," it read. Not as a diplomat. As a witness. He didn't reply right away, but that night he packed a bag. Back on Mars, Jake Ellis finally got a clear signal. His beacon locked onto a derelict Vathari science vessel drifting near Neptune's orbit. Its transponder was off, but its data core was still warm. He begged Earth Command for a recovery mission. They refused. Too risky, they said. Too close to the old border. So he went himself. Using a modified scout ship, he reached the derelict in 17 days. Inside, the air was stale, the walls covered in frost. The crew was gone, no bodies, no signs of struggle. Just empty chairs and flickering terminals. On the main console, a single file played on loop. A recording of the ship's final moments. Scientists shouting in panic. Alarms blaring. Then a voice, calm and ancient, speaking in a language no one had ever heard. The screen went black. Jake copied the data and fled. When he returned, he handed the file to Ryan Cole. Together, they decoded fragments. The Vathari had been experimenting on something they called the Archive, a structure floating in deep void, older than stars. They believed it held knowledge of the first civilizations. Instead, they woke something that saw all advanced life as a threat. Humanity had left before the final experiment. Their signature wasn't in the Archive's memory. They were invisible. For now. But the thing, whatever it was learning. It mimicked ship signals. It turned allies against each other. It didn't destroy. It erased. On Phobos, the Kavani child drew pictures in the air with trembling fingers. Each one showed the same shape. A sphere of darkness ringed with silent stars. Nina called an emergency meeting with fleet commanders, scientists, and the few off-world delegates still loyal to Earth. "We can't stay hidden forever," she said. "If this spreads, it won't care that we left the council. It'll come for us too." Daniel arrived the next day, his face older, his eyes sharper. He listened in silence as Ryan and Jake explained what they'd found. When they finished, he spoke just once. "We didn't cause this," he said. "But we might be the only ones who can stop it." No one argued. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the silence was growing, and humanity, for all its mistakes, was no longer just watching. Corsa 3, the first council world, fell without warning. It was Vathar Minor, a small research outpost orbiting a blue giant near the galactic rim. One moment, its comms were clear, reporting routine scans. The next, all signals stopped. No explosion, no distress call, just dead air. When a nearby Thrax freighter diverted to investigate, it found the station intact, but empty. Every console powered down, every life pod sealed, every body gone. Only a thin layer of frost coated the walls, as if time itself had frozen and then vanished. Panic spread faster than light. Within weeks, more systems went dark. Kavani homeworlds shut down their networks. Meyer ocean cities sealed their domes. Even the Vathari, once so sure of their control, began pulling their fleets inward, abandoning outer colonies. But retreat didn't help. The silence followed them. Ships that fled were found drifting, hulls unbroken, crews missing. Some returned with no memory, babbling about the eye in the dark. Then the refugees came, not in ones or twos, but in waves. Hundreds of vessels, some barely spaceworthy, appeared at the edge of human-controlled space. They carried Kavani families, Thrax engineers, even a few Vathari defectors. Most were starving. Many were sick. All were terrified. They begged for fuel, for food, for sanctuary. Some accused humanity of unleashing a weapon. Others whispered that humans were the only ones left who might understand. Admiral Nina Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the Ares, watching a stream of refugee ships dock at the Phobos way station. Her orders from Earth Command were clear. Maintain quarantine, provide minimal aid, do not allow integration. President Dixon feared disease, sabotage, or worse, being dragged back into a war they had walked away from. But Nina had seen the Kavani child's drawings. She had heard Ryan Cole describe the neural echoes from the derelict ship. She knew this wasn't war. It was something older, colder. Against orders, she opened the gates. Human medics boarded the refugee vessels. Ryan Cole led the team, using neural patches to stabilize those suffering from shock or memory loss. Among the newcomers was a young Zenthari named Kyle, barely older than the Kavani child. With silver eyes and hands that trembled when he spoke, he carried a data crystal wrapped in cloth protected like a relic. "This is all that's left," he told Ryan in broken English. From the Great Archive, Ryan brought him to Jake Ellis. Together they plugged the crystal into a shielded terminal. What emerged wasn't a message, it was a map. Not of stars, but of thought. It showed how the archive, once a library of cosmic knowledge, had been twisted into a weapon. The Vathari's final probe had activated its defense protocol. Identify advanced intelligence, isolate it, erase it. Cleanly. Silently. "It doesn't hate," Kyle explained, his voice soft. "It just corrects." Back on Earth, Daniel Cruz argued with President Dixon in a secure room beneath New Geneva. "We can't hide behind walls while the galaxy dies," he said. "We left to protect our freedom, not to watch others lose theirs." "Freedom means nothing if we're dead," Dixon replied. "We don't know what this thing is. We don't know how to fight it." "We don't have to fight it," Daniel said. "We have to understand it." Meanwhile, on Neptune's outer orbit, something drifted into human space. It was a Vathari dreadnought, the Sunder, one of their largest warships. Its hull was scarred with strange marks like clawed fingers had dragged across metal. No life signs, no power, just a ghost ship tumbling slowly toward the sun. Nina ordered a recovery team. Inside, they found logs half corrupted. The last entry showed the captain staring into a view screen, his face calm. "It learned our voices," he said. "Now it speaks with them." Then the feed cut, but in the ship's core, they found something else. A fragment of the archive's code, embedded in the navigation AI. Jake and Ryan worked for 3 days straight decoding it. What they discovered chilled them. The entity, now called the Silence by refugees, was adapting. It had begun mimicking ship signatures, tricking fleets into opening their shields. It was learning languages, tactics, even emotions, and it was heading inward, toward human space. On Phobos, Kyle showed Ryan a hidden layer in the data crystal. It contained a theory. The archive responded not to weapons, but to thought patterns. If a mind could reach it, not with force, but with clarity, it might be reasoned with. But only a species that hadn't triggered its defense could get close. Only a species that had walked away. Only humanity. Daniel arrived at the Phobos station 2 days later. He met Kale in the observation lounge, where the child from Vathar Minor now played quietly with light-projected stars. Kale looked at Daniel and said, "You left when others stayed. That is why you are still here." Daniel didn't answer. He just watched the stars. Nina called a secret council of scientists, pilots, and thinkers. No politicians, no generals, just those who had seen the truth. They agreed on one thing: humanity couldn't hide forever. The Silence wouldn't stop at borders. It saw no borders. Ryan proposed a mission: build a ship unlike any before, one that used human neural tech not as a weapon but as a bridge. Link minds directly to the archive's frequency, not to attack but to speak. Jake began designing it that night. He called it the Persephone, after the old myth of someone who went into the dark and returned. On Earth, Dixon refused to fund it, so they used black-budget credits, spare parts, and favors. Engineers from Mars, medics from Titan, pilots from Ceres all volunteered. They knew the risk. They also knew there was no other choice. As the Persephone took shape in a hidden dry dock near Europa, the Silence claimed another world. This time it was close, only 3 jumps from the human border. The last transmission showed a fleet of Vathari ships turning on each other, their weapons firing not at enemies but at themselves. The Silence was no longer hunting, it was teaching. And humanity, for the first time since they left the Council, felt the weight of being the last ones standing, not because they were strong, but because they had chosen to walk away, and in doing so had become invisible to the storm. Now they had to step back into the light. Not as saviors, not as warriors, but as voices in the dark, hoping someone or something would listen. Bartfuss and the Persephone was not built for war. It had no weapons, no armor plating, no missile bays. Its hull was thin, shaped like a teardrop, wrapped in quantum shielding that bent light and energy around it like water around a stone. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly with soft blue light, powered by a zero-point core humming in the ship's belly. At its heart sat the bridge, not a cockpit of switches and screens, but a quiet chamber lined with neural cradles. This was where minds would reach out not with guns, but with thought. Daniel Cruz stood in that chamber, running his hand along the smooth edge of his cradle. He wasn't a pilot. He wasn't a scientist. But he had spent his life listening, really listening to others. That, Ryan Cole said, was what they needed most. Not strength, but understanding. Ryan himself would link directly to the archive's data stream, using his medical neural interface to translate its patterns into human concepts. Jake Ellis would monitor the ship's systems from a secondary pod, ready to pull them out if the silence turned hostile. And KL, the young Xanthari, would serve as a bridge between species. His mind trained in the old ways of cosmic resonance, something humans had forgotten long ago. They launched at dawn. Earth time. No fanfare. No broadcast. Just a silent liftoff from the Europa dry dock, watched by a handful of engineers and Nina Rodriguez, who gave Daniel a single nod before the hatch sealed. For 12 days, they traveled through empty space. No comms, no signals, just the hum of the engine and the slow blink of distant stars. On the 13th day, the sensors changed. Space itself felt heavier, as if the void had grown thick. The stars ahead dimmed not from distance, but from something swallowing their light. "We're close," Jake said over the internal line, his voice tight. Ahead, floating in the black, was the archive. It was not a machine, not a station, not even a ship. It was a sphere of perfect darkness, ringed with faint silver threads that pulsed like veins. It gave off no heat, no radiation, no sound, yet it pulled at the mind like a memory just out of reach. Ryan initiated the neural link. Daniel lay back in his cradle, the cool gel forming around his head. Kale did the same beside him. Jake stayed at the controls, fingers hovering over the emergency disconnect. Then, the world dissolved. There was no up or down, no time, no body, only thought. And in that space, they met the silence. It did not speak in words. It showed them images. A civilization of light beings, ancient beyond counting, who had watched galaxy after galaxy burn in war. They had built the archive to preserve knowledge, to keep wisdom safe until others were ready. But over time, fear crept in. What if the wrong minds found it? What if they used it to destroy? So they added a lock, a guardian that would test any who came near. If a species showed signs of aggression, of greed, of conquest, the guardian would erase them, not out of hate but sorrow. The Vathari had failed the test. They had come with probes and weapons, demanding answers, claiming ownership. The silence had judged them and found them wanting. Now it turned its attention to the new signal. Human. Daniel didn't argue. He didn't plead. He simply showed it memories, not of wars or empires, but of small things. A child planting a tree on Mars, a doctor healing a stranger on Titan, a vote taken in a quiet room where people chose to walk away rather than force others to obey. He showed the silence humanity's flaws, its greed, its fear, but also its choice to leave power behind when it could have clung to it. Ryan added his own memories. The Kavani child's hand in his, the moment the neural patch brought her back from the edge, the quiet courage of refugees who shared their last rations with others. Kale offered something older. Xanthari songs of balance, of listening before speaking, of honoring what you do not understand. The silence paused. In that pause, they felt something new, not judgment but curiosity. Then a question formed in their minds, not in language but in feeling. "Why did you come back?" Daniel answered without words. He showed the silence, the empty ships, the frozen stations, the children with no home. He showed it that humanity didn't return to take but to ask, "Can this end?" For a long moment there was nothing. Then the silver threads around the dark sphere brightened. The pressure in space eased. The stars returned. The silence was receding, not vanishing, just stepping back. It would not erase. Not yet, it would watch. And wait. The neural link broke. Daniel gasped as his body returned to him. Sweat on his brow. Heart pounding. Ryan sat up slowly, tears in his eyes. Kale whispered a Xanthari prayer of thanks. On the bridge, Jake stared at the sensors. The archive's energy signature was fading, folding inward like a closing eye. "It's going dormant," he said, voice shaking. "It's stopping." They turned the Persephone toward home, but the journey back was not quiet. As they crossed into former council space, they found wreckage, ships torn apart not by weapons but by confusion. Fleets that had turned on each other now floated in broken silence. Yet among the debris there were signs of life, small beacons blinking, rescue signals, survivors. The silence had stopped hunting, but the damage was done. The council was gone. Its cities lay dark. Its laws meant nothing. What remained was not order but fragments, scattered peoples, broken systems, and the slow, hard work of starting over. When the Persephone entered human space, Nina Rodriguez met them in a shuttle. She didn't ask for a report. She just looked at Daniel and said, "You did it." "We didn't fix it," he replied. "We just asked it to stop." Back on Phobos, the Kavani child ran to Ryan the moment he stepped off the ship. She hugged his leg and didn't let go. Kale stood beside her, watching the stars through the dome. On Earth, President Dixon received the full data packet. He read it alone late at night. For the first time in years, he didn't see a threat. He saw a warning and a chance. Humanity would not rebuild the council. That old dream was dead, but from its ashes something else could grow. Not an empire, not a union, but a network of those who had survived. Humans, Kavani, Thrax, Meyer, even the few Vathari who had refused to obey. They would trade not just goods, but stories. They would heal not just bodies, but trust. And the Persephone would fly again. Not as a weapon, not as a symbol of power, but as a messenger. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing is not to fight, but to speak, to listen, to walk into the dark, not with a sword, but with an open hand. The silence had stepped back. Now it was their turn to step forward. Part 5. The galaxy did not heal overnight. Cities stayed dark. Trade routes remained broken. Families mourned those lost not to war, but to silence. Yet something had changed. The fear that once choked every system, the dread of ships vanishing, of voices cutting off mid-sentence, was gone. The silence had stepped back, and in that space life began to breathe again. Humanity did not return as rulers or saviors. They came as neighbors. Small human ships, painted in plain white with no insignia, carried food, medicine, and engineers to broken worlds. They didn't ask for payment. They asked only if help was wanted. On Kavani outposts, human medics worked beside local healers. On Thrax mining stations, Mars-trained engineers helped rebuild power grids. Even on former Vathari worlds, where suspicion ran deep, humans left supply pods at a distance and waited. Slowly, hands reached out to take them. Daniel Cruz did not go back to politics. He traveled instead, visiting refugee camps and orphanages, listening more than he spoke. He met children who had never seen their homeworlds, elders who remembered the Council's golden age, and young rebels who dreamed of something new. He told them the story of the archive, not as a warning but as a lesson. "Power doesn't come from control," he said once to a group of Zinthari students. "It comes from choice, and we chose to walk away so we could come back on our own terms." Ryan Cole stayed on Phobos, turning the old way station into a healing center. The Kavani child, now named Lyra by the staff, followed him everywhere. She still didn't speak much, but she drew constantly. Stars, ships, and now human faces. Ryan taught her to use a neural sketchpad, and her drawings began to show not just memory, but hope. Gardens growing on dead moons, ships docking without weapons, hands of different species touching. Kale remained with them. He became a teacher, sharing Zenthari ways of listening, not just with ears, but with the whole self. He said the silence had not been evil, it had been grieving, and grief, if left alone, turns to fear. We did not defeat it, he told his students. We reminded it that not all minds are the same. Jake Ellis returned to Mars, but not to his old lab. He helped design a new kind of station, one built not for defense but for meeting. It floated halfway between human and Kavani space, with open docks, shared gardens, and rooms where no species held more power than another. They called it the Crossroads. The first ship to dock there was a Meyer vessel, its hull covered in living coral. The captain stepped out barefoot, holding a bowl of salt water as a gift. Admiral Nina Rodriguez retired from the fleet. She took a small post on the Crossroads, overseeing security, not with soldiers but with mediators. Peace isn't the absence of conflict, she told new recruits. It's the presence of trust. She kept the heirs in orbit not as a warship but as a rescue vessel. Its cannons were removed, its cargo bays filled with seeds, tools, and clean water. On Earth, President Dixon stepped down after one more term. In his farewell speech, he said only this: "We thought leaving the council would protect us. But what saved us was remembering we were never alone." His successor was not a general or a diplomat, but a teacher from Ceres who had spent years helping refugee children. Her first act was to open Earth's archives to all species, every book, every song, every mistake. The Galactic Council was never rebuilt. No one wanted it. Instead, a loose network grew, quiet, patient, built on need rather than law. There were no grand halls, no voting blocks, no banners, just agreements made over shared meals, repairs done side by side, and stories told under alien skies. The Persephone still flew. Not on missions of urgency, but of connection. Daniel, Ryan, Cale, and Jake took turns aboard, visiting worlds that asked for nothing but company. They carried no weapons, no demands, only questions: what do you need? What do you remember? What do you hope for? One evening, years later, the ship drifted near the place where the archive had been. The stars there were brighter now, as if washed clean. Sensors picked up nothing, no energy, no signal, no trace. But as they passed through, Lyra, now a young woman, stood at the viewport and placed her hand on the glass. She didn't speak. She just smiled. They knew the silence was still there, watching, waiting, not as a judge but as a witness. Humanity had not fixed the galaxy. They had not brought back the dead or undone the damage. But they had shown something rare, that a species could choose to walk away from power and still return with open hands. That strength could be quiet, that survival could be kind. And in the end, that was enough. The Persephone turned toward home, its lights soft against the dark. Behind it, the stars burned steady. Ahead, 1,000 new beginnings waited. Not in grand declarations, but in small acts of courage, in shared bread, in a child's drawing of a ship with no weapons, sailing into the light. They were not heroes. They were humans, and that finally was something worth being.